Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Paul, and it is my great pleasure to welcome everyone today to the Big Love Festival, the second one, which is offered by the Foundation for the Development of Compassion and Wisdom to share with and celebrate their universal education program, so that hopefully we can cultivate some of our own compassion and wisdom in joining this. It's a massive pleasure to welcome Carla, or Venerable Tsultrim, today for the first of I think it's 18 sessions this week. I first met Carla 12 years ago at the first Universal Wisdom Gathering in Vajrayogini Institute in France, and I remember being really impressed with her down-to-earthness, kindness and wisdom, but above all a sense of humour. And then I met Carla again last year on the Big Love Festival, a session on mindfulness, which I do confess was my favourite session last year, to such an extent I joined her for 6 weeks on a mindfulness course that she guided online from Australia. So I'm going to ask her to start in a few seconds' time, or invite her to start. But before I do so, there will be some breakout rooms later in this session. So if anyone here would want it to be in their own language, could they possibly rename themselves and just indicate whether they would want to be in a Portuguese or a Spanish session, so that Ange can organise those groups. And whilst you're doing that, I invite Venerable Tsultrim to start the first session, which I know is going to be brilliant and a great start to the festival.
Thank you very much, Paul. All right, so I really appreciate that. Very kind words. Lovely way to start off a session on kindness. So I really do want to say thank you to everyone for inviting me to do this first presentation for this conference this week. No pressure, of course, being felt as the first cab off the rank. But anyway, so what I'm going to talk to you about today is kindness, and whether it is actually possible in any situation, no matter what. So first up, what does the dictionary say about kindness? Well, it says that it's the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate. And of course, this is a fair definition, I think. But also, I reckon that, like many definitions, it's limited. It doesn't really consider the depth of kindness. And frankly, from my own perspective, I think kindness has been given a bit of a bad rap, particularly in more recent years. I think that kindness is often perceived as naive or weak, sometimes foolish, certainly idealistic, and maybe sometimes even regarded as impractical. But my question is, who says this? Who says that stuff? Who is it that challenges, or perhaps sometimes actually even misuses the power and the value of kindness? And why do they do that? Why do people have the need to critique kindness in this way? There's a young Buddhist teacher in the Nyingma tradition called Pakchok Rinpoche. And this is one of my favorite Buddhist sayings. And he says quite profoundly, yet very, very simply, just be kind. No agenda, just be kind. And so I tend to think that sometimes, and maybe dare I say even a lot of the time, our kindness, whether offered or withdrawn, whether accepted or denied, whether encouraged or minimized, comes from an agenda that we have. And that this agenda is sometimes very conscious and quite deliberate, and sometimes conditioned, and therefore perhaps a little more unconscious. So what might that agenda be? Well, let's look at the dark side first, get that out of the way. Sometimes, whether as individuals or as a broader group even, our agenda for practicing or offering kindness is self-interest. As individuals, for example, we might think, I'll be kind to you because I know that if I'm kind to you, I'll get something or another in return. Even if that is simply a thank you. And how do we know that that's been our agenda? Well, a very easy way of identifying that is if we get upset, if after acting kindly, we don't get a response that we think we should have. So it might be something, we might do a kind action and don't get a response that we want. And we think to ourselves, everything I've done for them, and they can't even say thank you. And if that's our reaction, we know that in fact we had an agenda. It wasn't unconditional kindness. And of course, on a larger scale, kindness can be even misappropriated. Politically is a particularly good one. Politicians practice kindness to get people to vote for them. They offer all sorts of things all of the time to their constituents, not because it's the right thing to do or the kind thing to do, but because it will get them elected or prevent their opponent from being elected. But it's presented as if they are doing some sort of act of kindness, something that's in fact beneficial. And in Australia, we have a term for that called pork barrelling. So these are kindnesses done, but under the guise of self-interest. Sometimes our agenda for being kind might be guilt or obligation. And then our kindness is sort of offered through gritted teeth. We feel like we have to be kind to someone. At the Christmas family get-together, where we've been told that we have to be kind to the annoying Uncle John to keep Grandma happy on Christmas Day. So we say kind things, but through gritted teeth, and we think terrible things behind that veil of kindness. And the worst part is that when we pat ourselves on the back for pretending to be kind, which in reality might well be justified because Uncle John might well be annoying. But these are all agendas. These are all reasons, I guess, for being kind that isn't based on a real genuine desire to just be kind, no matter what. Another agenda is often fear. We often feel that if we aren't kind or nice to a particular person, then we'll have an experience that we don't want or that we don't like. They might bully me, or we'll experience some sort of harm or suffering if we don't do this act of kindness. So in order to avoid that harm or avoid that suffering, we pretend kindness. But really, that's also a form of manipulation as well. It's not kindness coming out of that, that pure intention, that good motivation. There's an agenda behind the motivation. But fear can also be an agenda for not being kind or not accepting the kindness of another towards us. we might think that if we're kind to someone who has caused harm, then we're letting them get away with bad behavior. And we don't really like that. We don't like it if people get away with, with bad behavior. But we're going to talk a little bit about this later, because I think this is a really, really important point when it comes to practicing and cultivating our kindness. And sometimes we're also afraid that if we accept the kindness of others, we're setting ourselves up to be vulnerable to them, allowing them to take advantage of us, or that by accepting kindness, we're letting go of our independence or our self-reliance. And I speak from experience when I talk about this, because in the end, we're all control freaks. We don't want to give up our control. And sometimes by accepting the kindness of others, we have to accept our, sometimes that we aren't as independent or as self-reliant as we might like ourselves to be. And we see that independence and self-reliance as a good quality. And we see that vulnerability as something negative, rather than recognizing that, vulnerability is actually a strength. And so we can be afraid of those things, which, is a real obstacle, I think, to both offering and accepting kindness. And sometimes the agenda is simply that we're conditioned to think that kindness not only is, but needs to be conditional, because we sometimes believe that not everyone deserves to experience or to be shown kindness. And for me, this is the real tragedy. The real tragedy of our limits that we create on our practice of kindness. But I wonder whether, these individualistic, or perhaps I might even suggest rather disingenuous ways of being kind, are in fact preventing us from truly touching the depth of kindness that we really do have within us as human beings. And by playing into these sorts of narratives and these sorts of constructs, we are really setting ourselves up. We are setting up so many limitations to our ability and our capacity to be kind to others, no matter what. And I really believe, this is just, my own perspective, but I really believe that our purpose as intelligent human beings is to consciously and deliberately develop our capacity for love and compassion, equanimity, because the truth is that we are the only ones who can do this. We humans. So why on earth would we not want to do this in the best possible way? And a brilliant way to start cultivating these sorts of qualities of love, compassion, equanimity, joy, is by practicing kindness. And through cultivating all of these sorts of qualities, then wisdom is inevitable. In developing our kindness, we have to combine our capacity for developing our wisdom as well. Because I'm not sure that we can truly be wise if we're not being kind. And I'm not sure that we can truly be kind without some element of wisdom. And of course, when I say wisdom, I don't mean clever. Wisdom is so much bigger and deeper and more meaningful than being clever. A lot of clever people in this world are neither wise nor kind. But for me, I tend to think that kindness and wisdom are mutually inclusive. And I really believe that in combination, they are probably the most powerful things in existence. But you can practice and go away for yourself and examine that and see if that's actually the case. But what I do know for sure is that kindness is something that everybody understands. It's not always easy to understand these big things like love and compassion, let alone know them. And I think even something like equanimity, you know, these are very deep and meaningful qualities that aren't quite so easy to access. But I think that when it comes to kindness, the majority of people do understand. Why? Because I think that most people have experienced some level of kindness at some time in their life. Just being taken care of in our mother's womb for 9 months is our first experience of kindness in this life. So every one of us has experienced that. And even though, you know, I understand that not every pregnant woman looks after themselves or their growing baby, but I really do think that in the main, most women do their best to do their best. But what I do genuinely believe is that every single one of us has the capacity to be kind within them right now in this very moment, irrespective of what the external circumstances they might be experiencing. And that's everyone. And I really do have confidence in this. I just think we forget how to do it because we get so caught up in self-interest. We get so caught up in our lives and our experience that we just forget how to be kind. But there are so many different ways to be kind. We tend to think of kindness as always being some sort of external action of body or speech. But kindness is of mind, and kindness is of heart, and kindness is of energy. You know, for example, just recognizing that someone is on their own journey and not judging them for that, that is both a kindness offered and received, whether they know it or not. Not judging yourself and recognizing the nature of change and suffering is a kindness both offered to yourself and received by yourself. And it's really important to point out that kindness must be directed towards ourselves as well as towards others. You know, we are part of the interdependent and interconnected mandala of this world. In order to be kind to others, we must also develop this ability to be kind to ourselves. The energy of the relationship with kindness doesn't just move or vibrate outward towards another. It also necessarily vibrates internally, in our heart and in our mind. We send it out and then it returns to us every time. We are part of that mandala. We are part of that circle. We're not separate from it. And we really do have to learn to be kind to ourselves as much as we are kind to others. And I understand that for many of us, this is really difficult because it was difficult for me for so many years. And that's because we are conditioned to punish ourselves, to criticize ourselves, to judge ourselves so harshly. And we're also conditioned in the same way to punish and criticize and judge others. You know, we're very good at getting the whip out and beating ourselves up about our lack of kindness, or whatever other million things we choose to beat ourselves up about. But we don't need to waste our energy on that. In fact, I implore you, please don't waste your energy on that. Today is the day that we can draw the line in the sand and say, you know what, no more. If I really and genuinely want to develop my kindness and my capacity to be kind, I have to include being kind to myself. And how we do that will look differently to everyone. You need to figure that out for yourself. But the main thing is practicing Am I continuing? So in our, we have to look at being kind to ourselves from that position of patience and gentleness. We can't be lazy about developing our kindness. So we have to be persistent, and we have to be determined to develop that kindness, but we have to be gentle in that process of developing and practicing kindness. And then if we do this, it will, I really believe this, that if we do this, it'll help us to understand much more deeply our interconnectedness and our interdependence with each other. Not just with each other as humans, but with our planet Earth, which is as Paul knows, is the gift that just keeps on giving despite how it's treated. It helps us to recognize all of the contents of the earth and the universe surrounding us, because kindness necessarily means relationship with ourselves and with others. Kindness doesn't exist outside of relationship. They too are mutually inclusive. You know, we often, I think, tend to perceive kindness only from the perspective of one being to another. And yet, if we look at kindness from this really spacious, open, broad, unlimited perspective, you know, we start to recognize the benefits we receive from the sun and the moon, the rain, the mountains, the rivers and the oceans, the forests, as well as all of the creatures within them, unlimited. And in fact, by recognizing this and by looking at our kindness from this expansive view, we start to see that we are in fact dependent on them, but perhaps they're not quite so dependent on us. You know, we are at Karuna, where I work, palliative care organisation, we have a podcast called What About Death? And very recently, I had the good fortune of interviewing a climate thanatologist from the US called Dr. Chris Kevorkian. And I also spoke the other day with an Australian conservationist called Bindi Owen for an upcoming episode of What About Death? But what's really interesting is that they both spoke about our need to recognise our dependence on the natural world, and that it's only through our kindness and understanding it and practicing kindness that we'll stop destroying it. You know, it's only through understanding our need for nature, for our ecosystems, for our own survival, you know, that we'll stop destroying. And if we don't start being kind to our world and its creatures, appreciating their importance, acknowledging their gift to us, it will be us that suffers in the end, we humans. The planet won't actually die. It might change, but it'll continue. But humans and the other beings in nature and nature itself, well, that's a different story. So our capacity to be kind is not just about human beings. It's not just about us as individuals, but it both directly and indirectly connects us to every part of our world. So, you know, I just ask the question, is it not better that we make that connection through kindness rather than through destruction? But the reality is that kindness has to be practiced. It has to be nurtured. It's a training, particularly in relation to being kind to those we may feel don't deserve it or don't warrant it. You know, it's very easy to be kind to those we like and to those who like us. There is very little effort or analysis required in that action. There is very little thought even, let alone investment, required to be kind to those who will stroke our ego in return. We so often limit our kindness to those we love and like, never taking our kindness out of that comfort zone, but only being kind to those we like and love, limits our capacity, you know, limits our ability for kindness. And our capacity as human beings to be kind is so much bigger than that. So I want to spend a little time talking about what gets in the way of being kind to those who cause us harm or who cause others harm. And as I mentioned earlier, it's often because we feel that kindness is actually some sort of reward. And what we are conditioned to think is that what we deem as bad behavior shouldn't be rewarded, but should be punished. We presume that if we are kind to those who cause harm, they'll just continue the bad behavior. And in fact, what we want to do is influence and control their bad behavior. Now, I'm not suggesting that there shouldn't be some sort of agreed consequence for what we might universally agree as being bad behavior. But what I am saying with great conviction, in fact, is that that consequence shouldn't be the withdrawal of kindness. It seems to me that those who are causing harm are the ones who need our kindness the most. They need our care and our concern. They need our generosity and our patience, and they need our support. Why? Because they're suffering. Happy people don't hurt other people. Unhappy people do that. So those who are causing harm need to be offered the example of kindness no matter what. You know, if we think about it, we'd probably be kind if someone we like or love did something that we didn't like. We'd probably have empathy towards that mistaken behavior. We'd probably have patience, encouraging them to, you know, try and do a little differently if they can. We'd recognize the difficulties that they might be experiencing that influenced their bad behavior. You know, with people that we love and we like, we try and develop an understanding of why that behavior is occurring. So if we think about it, those we tend to offer our kindness to, in fact, probably don't really need it as much. Our family and our friends. Now, I'm not saying or suggesting that you shouldn't be kind to your family and friends. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that our capacity for kindness is limitless. So why not also offer it to those who are suffering the most? You know, practicing kindness creates the space to really appreciate what's within us and around us. If we have this incredible human body that is strong, with limbs that help us to function, eyes, ears, a heart that beats strongly, all the amazing parts of the human body that keep us alive and well. But can we honestly say that we are truly being kind to our body? But the reality is that it can only be as kind to us as we allow it to be. But how often do we mistreat our body and then get irritated when we get sick or whatever? You know, practicing kindness is recognizing how extraordinary this body is in doing what it does for us day in and day out. Even if we just think about our breath, how amazing is our breath? That we just naturally breathe. We don't have to think about it. We just know how to do it. And how amazing it is that we can actually do this naturally. Because without breath, of course, we are dead. And yet, how often do we simply contemplate with kindness our breath and its connection to so many other things? You know, this extraordinary thing that is our breath. But what does that mean? You know, when we're breathing in oxygen. And how is that oxygen created? Well, it's created by nature. It's created by the trees. How are the trees created? They're created by the bees, you know, and it goes on and on and on. Let alone the fact that nature removes the things from the air that poisons us. And by recognizing and understanding this incredible interconnectedness and interdependence necessarily increases our capacity for kindness. How can it not? How can we not become more attuned, more mindful? And as Chökyi Nyingma Rinpoche says, more kindful. It's a necessary consequence, I think, when we expand our view of ourselves and our world and this interconnectedness and interdependence. How can we not be more kind? But it's also not just that. It's like understanding that our heart and our mind are a fundamental part to cultivating our capacity to be kind. How extraordinary it is that we can actually consciously understand, do, and cultivate this thing called kindness, that we can know it, let alone do it. You know, how amazing is that we can recognize it, put it into action, and develop it further and further and further. You know, but do we do that? Or do we waste this amazing ability that we have as human beings to be aware and to apply this awareness, not just for our benefit, but for the benefit of others? And when we think about it, there's really very little that we can't examine from the perspective of our engagement with kindness. The fact is, there is almost nothing that we experience that is not either the direct or indirect result of the kindness and generosity of others. Nothing. If you think about it, even today, wherever you are in the world right now, what have you experienced already today that has not been either a direct consequence of something or someone else? You know, whether it's the bed you slept in last night, the clothes you're wearing right now, you know, the food you ate for breakfast, the technology that we're using right in this minute, you know, the translators who are translating into Spanish and Portuguese. You know, every moment we have this opportunity to be kind and to be grateful, you know, for those, because every moment we are experiencing the kindness of another. And even if we think about something as simple as food, you know, how many creatures have given their lives in order for us to have sustenance? You know, I think often as vegetarians or as vegans, we can get a little bit high and mighty, you know, because we feel that we are being kind to the animals that are farmed for food. But how often do we consider every time that we eat our carrot stick or our ear of corn or eat our loaf of bread, how often do we really think about the billions and billions of creatures that have died every time a field is ploughed and harvested? You know, our kindness can be expanded out into the entire universe, where we can really start to understand the nature of our connectedness and why kindness is so very, very important. And kindness is an attitude as well as an action. You know, we often value money and material possessions and all sorts of external things, but not kindness. It baffles me. I'm constantly just puzzled as to why we don't put at least equivalent value into something such as kindness. Because when we don't, it just reduces our lives to this material existence when we have this extraordinary capacity as human beings to offer so much more. And we know that kindness can be sensed not just by people, but by animals, even plants. We know this, and yet we so often ignore it because of our agenda. You know, I recently read a story about a whale. I can't remember where it was. It was only in the last couple of months. And this whale was somewhere out in the ocean and had been captured, I don't know what the word is, but covered in like fishing stuff, you know, like, what do you call it? I can't think of what you call it, but fishing net. Yes, fishing net. And so these people were out on this small dinghy doing something or another out on the ocean, and they saw this whale that had been contained and was struggling in this fishing net. And so somebody dove. It took them, I think, something like 7 hours to free this whale from this fishing net. And at the end of doing this, I think there were 7 people in this boat, small boat. And at the end of it, the whale came over to this boat and went to every individual that was on this boat and allowed every one of those individuals to touch it. You know, it's like it knew that these humans were being kind and were helping it, and it came over and offered kindness in return. You know, the people that were describing this story said it was just, you know, unbelievable to recognize the energetic connection that they had between them because of having this strong and pure intention to be kind. But it's really important. We don't have to always do big things like that. You know, kindness can be the simplest of things, a smile. You have no idea how that might impact on somebody else. I tell a story quite often about the impact that a smile can have and the kindness of offering something as simple as a smile, because I think it's really important to understand how the smallest acts of kindness can have a significant impact. So I'll tell this story of a friend of mine. I worked for many years in suicide prevention, but this particular person that was thinking about suicide wasn't somebody that I worked with, but somebody that a friend of mine knew. But I've had the pleasure of speaking with her. And she told me a story how some years ago she had made the decision that she was going to die by suicide. And what she had decided to do, she'd been thinking about this for many months leading up to this act. And she'd made the decision on the day, and she'd made the decision as to how she was actually going to take her own life. But what she had also made the decision to do was that before doing this action, she was going to take one final walk along the beach up on the Sunshine Coast here in Australia. So she did that. She drove her car to the beach and she went for one final walk. But what she said to me was that in the months leading up to her decision to take her own life, she had always looked down. And she said, but you know, today for this final walk on the beach, what I decided to do was that everybody that walked past me, I was just going to look them in the eye. I was going to try and make eye contact with each one of them. So she said, I did that. I made this decision and I started this walk, and instead of looking down, I was looking up. And she said many people walked past her and some people ignored her. And, you know, some people did look her in the eye, but looked on. And she said, then this one man came towards her and smiled. She didn't know that, see, and every time I tell this story, I get emotional. I can't believe it every time. I try not to, but I can't. But she tells this story that this stranger, all he did was smile at her. And in that very moment, she said to herself, not today. I'm not going to do it today. And she went back to her car. And what she was going to do was she was going to die by carbon monoxide poisoning. So she had the paraphernalia that she needed. She took all of that paraphernalia out of the car, put it in the bin, and she drove home. Now she is married, she has children, and she will say to you that it was the smile of a stranger that turned and changed her mind. So we have to understand that the very smallest actions, we may not even perceive it, you know, as a kindness. But the more that we practice, kindness becomes effortless. It can be nourishment for us, for our own heart and mind, and it certainly can be nourishment for others. You know, kindness can help us let go of our anger. It can help us to be more patient, to be less frustrated, less judgmental and critical. It can certainly soften our heart. Kindness can give us permission to be gentler to ourselves and to others. But we have to make a conscious choice to be kind. We have to set an intention to cultivate and practice our kindness. And the reality is we have to make a determination to do it because we have to make effort. You know, kindness doesn't always necessarily come naturally. So we have to put some effort into practicing it. But we don't need to put boundaries and limitations on our offering of kindness. And I think it's really important to understand that kindness also doesn't always have to be a direct action. Of course, it's good if we can be outwardly kind towards another, but it's not always possible to do that. But what we can always do is that we can have a conscious attitude of kindness. We can always offer that attitude of kindness, that energy of kindness, and we can do that in every single moment. There never has to be an agenda to our kindness, not ever. We can just develop this ability to be genuinely kind in our heart and in our mind to all beings and all situations at all times. And that doesn't mean that we can't be firm if we need to be firm. We can be firm from a motivation of kindness. It doesn't mean that we can't get things done as long as what we need to do comes from an intention and motivation of kindness. Imagine if all of our governments made their decisions for their people from a position of kindness. Imagine if our economic system functioned from a position of kindness. We might not have quite as many billionaires in the world, but I'm not sure the world might not be better off. Just an opinion. But imagine if when people harmed, we responded from a position of kindness rather than from a position of punishment alone. We functioned as humans for centuries. And I think how we've done it to date seems to just keep the cycle of suffering going and going. So for me, I think we need to be radical. And how is it? What do I think? As sad as it is, we need to be kind no matter what. And it's tragic that being kind no matter what is seen as radical, or even worse, naive or foolish. I think that's absolutely tragic, but I think we have to be radical. And to be honest, I think the greatest power comes from being kind in attitude. So even if we can't translate that into action and words directly, we can develop this attitude of kindness. And then if we do that, we're more likely to make decisions that aren't so based in self-interest, far less agenda-based. So my encouragement as I finish this, my thoughts, I guess, these are just my thoughts. You can go away and think more about it. You don't have to agree. But I think what I'd like to say as I close is I really do encourage you to just go away and think about it. Check, moment by moment, whether or not what you're doing is from an intention of kindness, whether you have an attitude of kindness, or whether you have an attitude of withdrawal of kindness, or even mean-spiritedness. Because for me, kindness is one of the most powerful qualities that we can have. And I believe that kindfulness, as Cherki Nima uses, that kindfulness can change the world. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a conversation, because I think it's really important to think about our own lives, how we've seen kindness, how we've used it to date, and how we might be able to reflect on using it in the future. So we're going to have some breakout rooms, and I think Angela is going to do that. And we've got a couple of questions. So hopefully you've got something. If you've got a good memory, then good for you. But you might need to write these down if you'd like to participate in this discussion for a little while. And what I want you to talk about in your groups is, I want you to think of a time past, and again, it can be anything. It can be something small. It doesn't have to be some, great thing. But I want you to think of a time when you had the opportunity to be kind and you weren't. You made a conscious choice to not be kind for whatever reason. And this isn't about, again, beating yourself up about it. It's just about recognizing what was the obstacle. What stopped you from being kind in that moment? What didn't you think was going to be met if you were kind? So think of a time when you had the opportunity to be kind and you weren't. What was the obstacle? What did you feel at the time? And then what did you feel later as you reflected about that? So that's one question. And then the second question I want you to think about is, or I want you to talk about, is I want you to think of a time when someone has been unexpectedly kind to you. And again, it can be anything. And what was that like for you? Was it difficult for you to accept that kindness, or was it easy? And why was that? Why was it difficult, and why was it easy? So they're the questions that I want you to have a think about. And how long have we got? Where's Angela now? So it's 7:50. So if we give them, say, 20 minutes,
okay.
And then that gives us some time for questions if there are questions. Does that sound fair enough?
Let me see. So I think everyone.
Righto, off you go. Okay. So we've got everybody back? Nope. Few minutes. Okay, well, we'll hang loose.
20 seconds, so everybody will be back.
Okie dokie.
Venerable Tsultrim, I met you in Bodh Gaya. I was at Root Institute when you were there, and I wanted to send you my best greetings.
Who's that?
I'm Karina. Karina. I'm on the screen.
Where are you?
I've got long grey hair.
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh.
Do you remember?
That was a long time ago.
It was over 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been back to Bodh since like maybe 2015 or something. So,
Right.
nice.
Yes. I had many good talks with you and listened to you. It's wonderful to see you. I didn't put the name, it was the face that I thought, oh, that's Tsultrim. Well, we didn't call you Tsultrim, we called you by your first name, I think.
Carla, yes.
That was it.
Yes, I have no preference. Lots of people still call me Carla, so it's whatever mood they have. So I don't mind at all. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh no, you're welcome. It's lovely to see you again. Yeah. So where are you? What part of the world are you in?
I'm in Spain, in the south of Spain.
How
near Osaling. I'm near Osaling. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Yes. Okay. Very nice. Yes. I've never been to Spain. I hope one day I can get to go.
I hope so.
Righto. So where are you, Angela, now? I can't see it. Oh, there you are up the top. So we're right to go. Excellent. Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes if anybody's got, well, first of all, let's have a few minutes about your conversation. So what did you discover? Could you think of a time when you could have been kind, but you chose not to be? And what was behind that? And then what was it like when somebody was kind to you? Did you find it difficult to accept that kindness? How'd you go in your conversations? Otherwise, we'll have some questions if you've got questions. So whatever works for you. Don't be shy and don't bite.
Yeah.
Well,
I
might. No, I won't. No, I won't bite. Truly.
Can I pose a question?
Please, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Hello.
Hi. Hello. Oilun here. Yeah. Our group didn't get very far to finish the 2 questions because we went a little bit deeper, which was nice to begin with.
Good.
That. And I think one thing that came out is that sometimes it's given the situation, I can see that we may have to choose to be kind in 2 ways. You may have 2 things to look after at the same time. Do you sort of like understand what I mean? You may have 2 people trying to get your attention at the same time. So how do you actually do that?
Lucky you. 2 people trying to get your attention at the same time. Wow. Look, I think, those sort of situations, I guess that's where you apply patience. And I think it depends on understanding the motivation for each of those individuals as well, I guess, like every circumstance is so different. But I think it's really key when you're thinking about kindness towards others, it's always just understanding that we're all in the same boat. We're all just trying to make do and do the best we can and get on with life. And I think so our practice of kindness is always about just recognizing that life is hard for everyone. We have different degrees of that, of course, and in terms of them, if what they want is they want your attention, and so how do you manage that? I think a lot of that is around what is, the greatest benefit. It might be that if there's 2 people that both need you or both want you, you've got to prioritize which one needs this the most, or which one can wait. you know, I just think you've got to be, but I think if the intention is kindness, then how you respond to it, even if you have to be firm, they'll see it in that, you know, from that place. You know, they won't see it as you being, just brushing somebody off, you know, because I don't want to have anything to do with the hard one. I'm just going to give my attention to the easy one. You know what I mean? Does that make sense or not so much?
Yeah,
I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
I think just to keep in mind, your intention is very important.
Always.
Good reminder.
And I think that's why we have to remember that kindness is a practice. You know, we don't just be kind sometimes. It really is about developing this very conscious, ongoing attitude of kindness that we apply moment by moment by moment by moment. And we take that, if you're meditators, you know, you take that into your meditation practice. You know, you use it in your mindfulness practice. You know, it's just something that's always there. And that's why the more that we do it, eventually it's like all of these things, you know, what we practice, we get good at. And the more that you practice kindness, the more effortless it does become. And for those that we find it the most difficult to be kind towards, we start getting a sense of how come, and that's about us, not about them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other questions or comments? Feel free to make a comment if you like. I don't mind.
I think we have Francisca and we have Victoria as well. We need to ask something.
Yes, hello. Well, first of all, thank you.
Oh, there you are. Yes, you're up in the corner. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things that we talked about was that sometimes it's kind of hard to be kind when you are trying to defend, is that the word, to back up your own point of view, your own perspective on something. So the example that I gave was that sometimes at home when we are discussing our perspective over some topic, it's kind of hard to put ourselves in the shoes of others and understand that they are also defending their point of view. So I was just wondering right now if sometimes it's also like a gesture of kindness to realize that we are not in the right place to have that argument at the moment, and then we just say so. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to, we are not at the right place, so we are not going to say anything about it.
Yeah, I think for sure. And I think, you know, particularly right now in this day and age when we have so much polarization around COVID and vaccination and, you know, all of these sorts of things. Yes, I think we can be discerning about how we engage in these sorts of things. But you know, again, I think we've got to be very conscious of intention and motivation, you know, behind that. And that we have to make sure that we are, you know, that kindness, if what we're doing is we're withdrawing because of impatience, you know, it's like, I mean, it's probably wise to withdraw if you're being impatient and frustrated as part of the process. But then I think it really needs reflection on how can I just listen.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, because the reality is we don't actually need to make a statement back.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And part of the kindness is not, you know, we can, the kindness to ourselves can be, okay, I actually don't need to argue, you know, I can just, but I can listen. And I can listen, you know, from this place of kindness, from this attitude of kindness, understanding that they believe, you know, what they're saying from the depths of their heart, the same way as I believe what I believe from the depths of mine, and recognizing again that mutual confusion that we experience. Because, you know, we do. I mean, I know people on both sides of the, you know, the COVID argument, the vaccination argument, and both of them see their points of view as very valid, you know, and very reasonable. What to do, you know, it's like okie dokie, you know what I mean? So I think where the greatest challenge comes is that our ego tells us we must respond. You know, it's like, no, just listen, you know, just listen and be gentle and be kind to them. You don't have to say whether you agree or disagree.
No.
You know, you can just nod. I see is a very good thing. I see. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. No worries. Anybody else?
I think Victoria.
Hi, Carla, and thank you so much. It's so inspiring. And I just wanted to ask you, in our group, what came up was families. So you'd said, you know, being kind, it's easy to be kind to people we love and we like. Actually, I'm not so sure. I personally find it easier to be kind to a stranger or someone I don't know so well. Where my practice is being kind to my partner and my child, and then feeling frustrated when that doesn't happen. And do you have any strategies you can suggest for how to work with that, to transform it?
Yes, I mean, I think that this is also true. You're quite right. I mean, oftentimes we are the hardest on those that we are the most intimate with. So part of the kindness around that is, you know, to recognize that we often judge those that we are closest with the most harshly. And so to start accepting that they're human too, just like me. You know, they make mistakes and they say stupid things, and that this is part of being a vulnerable human being, you know. So I think that's where the kindness comes, is, you know, reducing our expectations, you know, limiting our expectations of others is not only kind to them, it's actually kind to us, because it takes an enormous amount of energy to be judgmental, you know. And I think that's, you know, when we're about to respond or react to a particular situation, you know, I often ask myself, what energy am I about to expend in responding to this? Am I about to expend a whole pile of negative energy, or am I going to try and, you know, let out some positive energy? Because I'll feel better if it's positive energy, let alone the person that it's, you know, heading towards. And so I think a lot of our kindness can actually come from that understanding of, you know, if you have expectations, you're going to have disappointments, and to learn to just, you know, don't be so hard on each other. Doesn't matter. Again, same with people who cause harm, you know, don't be so hard on them. You know, we don't know their life, you know, we don't know their circumstances. And I guess this became really, you know, obvious to me when I was working in prisons. You know, and you hear some of the stories of some of these people and you think, jeepers creepers, I'm not bloody surprised. I'm not surprised you did what you did. You know, holy Toledo, what a life. And so I think it's just really this sense of starting to be, you know, gentler with others, which is not something that I've been familiar with. People who know me will tell you that historically, I have not been a very gentle person. I am very forthright, and I still am, but I try to do it in a kinder way these days. But, you know, I was less so now, but I still am. But, you know, very opinionated, very right, wrong, very black, white. And when you're like that, you are necessarily quite harsh. you know, because you don't allow that spaciousness in that room. And I think that's the beauty of kindness. Kindness creates spaciousness in room when you're engaging with others. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okie dokie. Anybody else? Hello, Wendy.
Thank you so much, Ven Tsultrim, for all that you're giving us. Just a quick reference to one of the really powerful things that you said that affected me is how one of the reasons it's hard perhaps to be kind is because of this control freak mentality. I'm independent. I don't need your help. I don't, you know, I'm not going to give. I just wonder if you have any advice or suggestions on that, a bit more on, for those of us who are control freaks, how to, you know, let the kindness in.
Look, you know, I think the main thing, and again, I speak from experience, you know, I was raised as somebody who was very independent. I was raised to be very self-reliant and very strong and not to rely on others. And it's not that that, you know, my family didn't teach me about the kindness of others, but it was always sort of a last resort, you know. And so I think it really is about, how can I say it, like starting to question what the fear is about, you know. So for me, it's like I really, my whole life, struggled to ask for help and accept help. Like I just didn't do it. Like I'd have to be in the absolute depths of despair, and even then it would be under sufferance. But there were two things. So first of all, I started to get a sense of what my, you know, what was behind that. And it was my fear of vulnerability. You know, I saw vulnerability as a weakness, and I saw asking for help as making me vulnerable and therefore as a weakness. So the more that I reflected on, you know, vulnerability, and in fact that vulnerability is a power, in fact, it's a superpower, that it gives you strength. It's not weak, but it makes you strong. Then I could actually start to see that every time I put a wall up to somebody else offering me kindness, I am being unkind back. You know, it's like, and actually I'll give you an example. Many years ago, I worked for an organization, and I can remember going to a meeting of all of the particular centers. We all came together. It was like a national meeting. And one of the people who was sort of one of my bosses, and I can remember he just gave me a compliment this one day. We were at this conference thing. And he said something like, you know, I mean, I can't remember exactly, but it was something like, oh, you look nice today or something. And I just totally snapped back, basically, and said something unkind. Can't remember what it was, but basically said something unkind. And this was a really powerful and very, it was a bit of a turning point for me. I've had many, but it was one of them. And he said back to me, Carla, if you're going to throw my gift back in my face, that's your choice. And it was like, wow, slap, like it was a seriously hard slap. And in that moment, you know, I think I probably swore at him and, you know, said, blow you, except probably not quite so kindly. But I went away and reflected about it. And he actually ended up moving to another state. And I remember sending him a card, you know, sometime later and just saying, you know, that was really important, because by me throwing that gift back, I was coming from a place of self-interest. I wasn't even thinking about his genuineness. And it was a very harmless, kind thing. And that was pivotal for me to start understanding that it's actually okay, you know, to not only accept the gift, but to recognize the mutual connection in, you know, offering and receiving. So even though in the moment I thought he was horrible and mean for saying such a terrible thing, on reflection, the fact that he even said that, I now see as a great kindness. Yeah. And I told him that. That's what I said. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know if that helps or not.
That's very helpful. Thank you so very much.
Righto. So anything else? Any other questions? Otherwise, we're running out of time. You're welcome to ask more if you'd like, but.
India is a poor country.
Mm.
We don't have, we find, you've been to India, I suppose, and a lot of beggars are there.
Mm.
And sometimes if we have 10 loaves of bread, but
Mm.
there are 100 beggars to looking for bread.
Mm.
So there we don't know whom to be kind with,
Yes.
you know.
And I
mean, yes, similarly, if somebody rightly said, you know, but here everybody is looking for kindness. That's what we sort of see. And if somebody offers gratitude or kindness to us out of the blue, we become a bit suspicious as
yeah, you do.
yeah, so that's a bit confusing at times.
Yes. Yes, I think that's actually a really good word. That's what happens, is that we become a bit suspicious, and that's because we our offering of kindness is often done with an agenda. So we presume that their offering of kindness is the same. We tend to judge others by ourselves, you know. So I think that's why it's really important that we be very consciously aware of our intention and our motivation when we're offering kindness. But in terms of a direct outwardly action, you know, like a material action of kindness like that, if you've got 10 loaves of bread but 100 beggars, you know, the reality is that practically we can't always, like the reality is we can't save the world. You know, we can, some people can and choose not to, perhaps, but in the main, for the majority of us, you know, our capacity to help a majority is fairly limited. But that's why I think for me, even if all we're doing is cultivating our attitude of kindness, so that even if we can't do something, you know, something outwardly in terms of direct action, where we can do it is in here, in our heart. You know, we can always send out kind energy, you know, wishing that they have everything that they need. You know, I wish I had $1 million to, you know, to give to this group of people for whatever reason, but I don't. But, you know, may I send out this energy that, you know, that might help them to, you know, have a sense of what it might be like. You know, I don't believe that kindness always has to be in direct action. You know, I think because even doing that direct action, if we do that without a really genuine attitude, it's probably agenda-based, you know. So I think developing this attitude of kindness, this real heartfelt, you know, wish, because we do want people to have everything that they need. You know, we don't want people to experience suffering. We don't want people to have harm or to cause harm or to be harmed. And I think we can you know, use that as a, you know, there's not a moment that we can't think kindly towards another, even if we can't actually do a physical action. So when we think of a beggar on the street, we can think kindly towards them and not harshly, you know, not judgmentally. Keep thinking about it. Yeah. Righto.
Thank you.
All righty. We had enough. I can talk about this stuff forever, so don't leave it up to me. Angela will have to make the decision.
Either Paul or Victoria, you want to say a bit of closing or something, or anybody?
Yeah, I'm happy to. The guy started it, so I'll finish it. Just a massive thank you to Carla. Just a great session again. I've personally really enjoyed it. I'm sure everyone else has, and hopefully, if there's one next year, you'll come back, Carla, again. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you
so much.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
well.